Brilliant, thanks Selena. As Selena mentioned, it was supposed to be Beth giving this presentation this morning, this afternoon. So apologies if I'm a little rusty on the details, but I will do my best. So this presentation, Beth has pulled together and was aiming to cover her journey to chartership, as well as the opportunities that she's had since gaining her C.WEM status. So she's split into 4 main sections: about me, rather about Beth, Beth's journey to chartership, the key tips she's learned from her chartership application, and then the opportunities she's had since gaining her chartered status. Just as a bit of a background, Beth is actually my line manager as well as my mentor for my application. And I've worked on quite a number of the projects she's worked on since I joined with MOTS, 4 or 5 years ago. So hopefully I'll be able to give a bit of an overview on what she's been involved in. So yes, Beth gained her C.WEM in 2016. She had joined with MOTS as a graduate in 2012, where prior to this she had a background that was mainly in physical geography, and then she did a focus on coastal processes and kind of GIS and remote sensing, both of which she received from Cambridge, and she graduated in 2012. She has a broad interest in coastal projects, offshore projects, and in particular commercial management since she joined MOTS as a graduate. And then as she kind of progressed through her career, she developed a specialism in FSM business cases and strategy delivery, as well as integrated coastal zone management, feasibility stuff. And then she's also worked on subsea cable routing and siting. So the timeline down the bottom just gives a bit of an overview of what she's been up to since leaving school. So as I said, she did her BA in geography at Cambridge, and then went on to do her MPhil in the environmental sciences. She joined MOTS in 2012, and then submitted her C.WEM application in 2016, at which point she got her chartered status. She then became a senior engineer in 2019 and was actually promoted to the coastal account lead last year in 2020. And this year has picked up the offshore in addition. So she's currently the coastal and offshore account lead for Mott MacDonald, meaning she is responsible for all projects in the coastal and offshore account, as well as for building relationships and winning work. So when Beth started her chartership journey, the first thing she did was kind of created a build-up of her experiences and her CV of activities across the portfolio. So what she did is she decided to take a focus on 3 projects that covered each of those attributes, as well as additional kind of activities that sat alongside it, so that she could have the 3 main as the focus and then use the extra as supporting. The way Beth did it, which is also the way that I've done it, is she built up a spreadsheet that covered each of those attributes, and color coded basically which ones were most relevant to each individual attribute, which ones could kind of support, and then which ones aren't relevant. An example of that can be seen here. Obviously, there is lots of different ways you can do this, but there is a word limit on how much you can include in your application. So one of the key things is making sure that you are using the most relevant examples for each of those attributes. These are the slides that Beth took in as printouts for her presentation and her interview. So they're the 3 projects she focused on. So the first being Jury's Gap Tidal Basin. So this was a project appraisal report, so a PAR, which for those of you who are involved in FSM is now been replaced by an OBC, an outline business case. So essentially Jury's Gap Tidal Basin goes through the 5 different management cases, looking at the best option for flood management at Jury's Gap, including economic, commercial, management, etc. She also used Port Clarence and Greetham South which was a detailed design project looking at, I think it was a managed realignment location. And then her final project was integrated coastal zone management in the Bahamas. So essentially, sorry, I'm just reading. So the Jury's Gap was an optioneering and design development project which focused on discussing and developing options by looking at the constraints and opportunities for the client. Her second was Greetham, which focused on her role is more of a commercial management and the tools that she used to track the progress, her resources and change, because that was a design and build project. And then the third project was a project that she was the PM for in the Bahamas, which needed particular focus from different stakeholders to beef up the feasibility of the integrated coastal zone management approach. So as you can see, there's a range of clients, there's a range of people she worked with, and a range of stakeholders throughout the 3 different projects. So therefore supported the attributes well using different examples from different locations. So Beth's key tips for Chartership. So the first is make sure you're choosing projects that you enjoy. Obviously not always possible, but it means that when you're writing, you're going to find it more interesting to write, you can have more motivation to write. And also when you're interviewing, your interest and passion is going to come through. Motivation, figure out your motivation and what helps you best, whether it's doing it, taking specific time at the weekend, saying, right, I'm going to do an hour after work, so many nights a week. Basically find out when you work best. Third is get involved. There's lots of different talks, conferences, activities by CIWEM. She said get involved with these, make sure that you're using them as an opportunity to learn and meeting new people, as well as other organisations outside of CIWEM. Keep on top of it. Everyone says it from the start, keep on top of it, record your CPD, log your activities, make notes of your projects. It will make things easier if you do this. Talking from someone who didn't do it and didn't take the advice, yeah, definitely do that, because you're just going to make yourself a bigger headache at the end. Her fifth is interview practice. So ask people to quiz you on your competency report, get them to ask you questions. Yes, you've written it, you know what you've written, but it will help you to articulate and summarize what you've included. And then her final one is make sure it's all about you. She said it sounds obvious, but a lot of people are in the habit of talking about, we did this, we did that, the project had this involved. Make sure you're writing what you did specifically, what you were responsible for, what your involvement was. So this slide just kind of summarizes what Beth's been doing following Chartership. She's had a number of different roles and it's opened up more opportunities to take on responsibility, but also has allowed her to have a wider set of roles and opportunities, including her current, which is the account lead role. So it was rather than just a project manager, she became project principal, taking on both technical and commercial roles. Line management, so she, as I said, she's my line manager, and she's a line manager for a number of us. So helping people with their appraisals, their goal setting and their well-being. She's taken on a more active role in business development and setting out the strategy for our account, which has obviously now led on to her role as an account lead and being responsible for the account itself and business development in their account. And then a big one that Beth is involved in is mentoring. As I said, she's my mentor. She's mentor for a couple of others as well. But she's also a mentor outside of CIWEM for those who aren't necessarily going down the CIWEM route. She provides mentorship generally for their careers. One of the big things and interests of Beth is her interest in kind of international development. So she's been able to pursue projects that really interest her, especially in her role and being responsible for BD. It means we're bidding for projects that she thinks are interesting and she'd like to work on. So she helps with both the business development and project delivery. I think this picture on the right here is of Parika in Guyana. So in Parika, they have a severe flood issue. So we've been working on a detailed design project to basically stop this from happening. International development, the kind of 6 main themes that seem to happen are obviously the rising sea levels due to climate change has a big impact on coastal projects around the world. There's a big issue with coastal erosion and degrading of existing coastal defence assets, and that results in salinity and grace. There's a lot of coastal pollution, particularly in certain areas internationally, less so in the UK. Obviously, there are a number of extreme weather events as a response of climate change, overfishing and biodiversity loss. And then there's a lack of education about climate resilience and adaptation. So a lot of our projects tend to be for World Bank, Caribbean Development Bank. So they're not just the kind of detailed design and hard engineering. It's the education, it's the climate resilience, it's the not just a environmental impact assessment, it'll be an environmental and gender impact assessment, a social impact assessment, making sure that the wider benefits of these defences or of these works are considered and accounted for. So being part of the wider water and environment community has given Beth a number of opportunities. So she's attended and presented at a number of conferences such as Flooding Coast. She's contributed to guidelines and development of best practice, such as the Jamaican Coastal Management Guidelines, an example of which is on the right there, which was a project with the World Bank back in 2017, I think that one was. She's met new people across a number of organisations and across a wide range of sectors. And she's attended various talks and discussions on emerging technologies, changing political arena and changing culture, such as renewable energy. She said these are the things that are sometimes part of her job and sometimes extra from her job itself, but they are what keeps her interested and what keeps her in her role. So yeah, apologies, that might have been a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. But as I said, I've worked with Beth since I started in 2016, so I can actually probably answer a fair amount of questions on any of the specific projects, etc. So please feel free to ask away.
Thank you, Lucy. That was excellent. We haven't got any questions popping through at the moment, but I just wanted to echo actually the key tips that Beth suggested. It did remind me of also some of the actions that I was taking when I was preparing for my chartership. So, you know, choosing a project that you're interested in and you enjoy doing, you know, when you do answer the questions in your interview, that passion will come through. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in terms of motivation, when I selected and committed to a assessment date, I tended to go into work an hour early just to work on my CIWEM and just dedicate that time to getting my competencies sorted, preparing for the presentation. And also in terms of keeping on top of it, I think my tip would be to prepare some quarterly, I called it reflective statements. So every 4 months, I kind of put some time aside to check in on the CIWEM competencies and see where my work experience and examples align. So, and I checked in with my mentor. So that's, you know, don't leave it to the last minute, because you'd find it in 4 months, you do quite a lot. So capture that, and it's really useful for your CIWEM. So thank you, Lucy. Barbara, if you'd like to do your presentation.
Hi, Selena, certainly. Thank you. Just bear with me for a second while I share my screen. Oh, apologies, for some reason. The presentation is having a bit of a temperament here. 1 second, I'll find out how to share this in a little bit so that everyone can see it properly.
No worries, Barbara. In the meantime, just a reminder to the attendees, please use the Q&A if you'd like to answer any, ask any questions.
Hopefully everyone can see that now.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, apologies everyone for that. You would think that after a year and a half of using Zoom, I would have figured that out by now, but sorry. Yeah, so thank you so much everyone for joining us today. As Selina already mentioned, I will be talking about our various routes to membership. Lucy has already spoken briefly about Chartership, which I will also talk about, but I'm also hoping to step away and just briefly cover our other membership grades, just in case, you know, someone in the audience might be interested or might not be necessarily ready for Chartership and is thinking just of a more entry-level membership grade to CIWEM. Before I start, really, simply because of time constraints, I won't have the opportunity to go into great detail, into the nitty-gritty of everything. But everything that I will be covering today is available on the website. We also have a fantastic membership webinar series, which I think Barbara Woods has linked into the chat. So please make sure to check that out. If after that, if you've read all the guidance documents that are available and you've watched the webinars and you still feel like you're not entirely sure or you still have questions, then please do get in touch with us. So the membership email address is on the screen below. So it's membership@ciwem.org. Alternatively, you can also call us if you'd rather speak to us directly. We're always here, you know, we're available for people in case they have any questions or with practical advice if you're just not sure about which membership grade to apply for. Okay, so let's dive in, shall we? We've already heard a little bit about you know, who CIWEM is from Lucy, but just in case you're not really familiar with CIWEM, so we're essentially a membership organization, and you can join us at any stage in your career, whether you are studying, you are actively looking to progress, or whether you already have extensive industry experience. Our membership grades and qualifications aim to add value and recognition to your achievements. We will also actively help you progress through your career, whether that's through qualifications or standards or networking or career enhancement. CIWEM is a fantastic place to expand on all of these aspects. So just a quick rundown of all the membership grades that we offer. They are on screen at the moment. Now, some of these are rather self-explanatory. So for example, we have a student and apprentice membership. This is essentially what it says on the tin. So the student membership is for people who are actively studying and are looking to kind of get their foot through the door with a professional institution. It just simply, you know, it's a fantastic opportunity for networking. I think if anyone is a student or a graduate and they're not entirely sure, you know, where to progress with their career, then joining a professional institution is a fantastic way of, you know, just expanding your network and just, you know, getting that additional guidance and direction that you might need. A fantastic thing about student membership is that it's free. So, you know, we like to support students as much as possible. We understand how difficult it is, especially financially. So yeah, there's no application fee, there's no subscription fee that comes with student membership. Then we have the apprentice membership. Again, it does, you know, what it says on the tin. This is for apprentices who are currently enrolled into an apprenticeship scheme. It works pretty much as the student membership does. Yeah, it's kind of like an entry-level membership grade. Then we have the graduate membership grade. Again, this is for graduates. As you know, if you've recently graduated from university and you're already in employment, then you are eligible to apply for this membership grade. Please do bear in mind that this is the shelf life of this membership grade is rather short. So we usually admit people with about 2 years post-graduation to this membership grade. Anything further than that would need to go into non-chartered membership. Then we also have the environmental partner. Everything that I've mentioned so far has the requirement or the prerequisite of having a university degree, so an honours degree or equivalent. The environmental partner is a fantastic way of joining the institution if you don't have any qualifications, but you might be a bit experienced, but also you don't know really what kind of, how to get involved with CIWEM. You know, the environmental partner grade is fantastic for you if you just want to get your foot through the door, access all the benefits that CIWEM offers, such as the Mantle platform, you know, all our publications or our events, etc. But if you're not entirely sure whether, you know, you're ready to apply for chartership or a higher membership grade, then environmental partner is definitely the way to go. Then a step higher up, we have the membership grade, which is a non-chartered membership grade, and also the technician member grade. This is for individuals who have around 3+ years of industry experience. You know, again, it's a fantastic starter way to start your journey towards chartership potentially. I will talk about this membership grade in a bit more detail a bit later. Then we find out also how we have the chartered membership grade, which Lucy has already spoken about, and I will as well in a bit more detail, as this really forms the core of our membership base, and it's also kind of the more complicated and a bit more daunting of the application procedures. So yeah, I'll cover that in a bit more detail later. And then finally, we have the fellow members. These are really the most accomplished, that, you know, really experienced professionals in the water and environmental industry. So we're talking really 10-15+ years of experience for fellowship applications. So as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, becoming a non-chartered member. So this membership grade is perfect for professionals who have recently entered into the industry. So they've kind of, in a way, aged out of the graduate requirements. So they have 3+ years of industry experience. So essentially, yes, you may have more experience than the graduate, but you don't quite have enough experience for chartership. Then non-chartered membership is really a fantastic way to get things started. Again, touching on what Lucy already said regarding the application requirements for chartership, when you're a non-chartered member, you can already start to think about, you know, your chartership application, and that includes everything, you know, like building on your CPD, you know, participating in projects that will help you answer the mandatory competencies for chartership. So when you're, this non-chartered membership grade offers a perfect opportunity to do that, because as Selena and Lucy have already said, you know, you don't want to get to chartership and then realize, oh, there's so much to do, and you don't really know where to start. So, you know, non-chartered membership, it provides kind of like a nice segue for you to start preparing for your chartership application. In terms of the requirements for application, you do need an honours degree or NEBOSH diploma in environmental management to be eligible to apply for non-chartered membership, and also experience in water and or environmental management over a minimum of 2 years. So these are really the only application requirements for non-chartered membership. The application process itself is relatively straightforward. So if you look on our website, then we list all the requirements. You apply, and then you hear back from one of my colleagues within sort of a month. So it doesn't take that long to apply for non-chartered membership. So this is some of the requirements that you will need to submit for non-chartered membership. I'm probably not going to go into a lot of detail here. As I said, these are also available on the website. So I think I'm just going to quickly move on to chartership, as that really is the core, and there's a lot more to explain about chartership application. So as I said, we've already heard a little bit about becoming a chartered member, but I'm just going to perhaps talk a little bit more about the practicalities of applying and what actually CIWEM requires from you when you do apply for a chartered membership, as well as kind of like the timeline that you can expect when you apply for chartership. So in terms of qualifying for chartered membership, you need an honours degree or equivalent. If you studied abroad, we do perform a qualifications check to make sure that you're eligible, depending on any additional registrations. So for example, chartered engineer, chartered environmentalist, chartered scientist, you might also need a master's degree. You will also need sufficient amount of industry experience. Now, we usually tell applicants that this is around 5 to 6 years. This is not a hard and fast rule, but simply if you have less than 5 years experience, then you are unlikely to have the experience that we require you to adequately answer the mandatory competencies, simply because some of the questions tie into a bit more project management. And if you have less than 5 years experience, then you won't be able to answer those questions. We also have a work-based learning route towards chartership. This is for individuals who do not have a degree. Again, not a problem if you don't have a degree. It just means that you will need to go down the work-based learning route towards chartership. It sounds scary. It's really not. All it is that there's an extra, just one additional form that you will need to complete and submit as part of a standard chartership application. In terms of kind of the timeline and the process, unlike the previous membership grades, which we recruit on a rolling basis, we recruit chartered applications on a cyclical basis. So that's every 2 months, there's a deadline that you will need to submit your application by. If your application is complete, this will be checked, then it will be sent off for assessment. If you pass written assessment, then you will be invited for a professional interview. And if you pass interview, fantastic, congratulations, you'll become a chartered member. And the entire process kind of takes between 3 to 4 months, so it shouldn't take longer than that. If at the point of written submission, the assessors identify areas of improvement, or especially with the mandatory competencies, areas where you might need to expand a little bit more on your answers, then you will be asked to resubmit. Please do not take this as a setback. This really is only to ensure that you have the best possible chance at professional interview. So we always figure, it's best to resubmit at the written stage rather than having to go through the interview and then having to, not being successful after interview. So yeah, please don't take it personally. If you are asked to resubmit, it's really just an opportunity for you to improve on your application. Okay, in terms of what is required for applying for chartership, it's an online application form. This is perhaps a little bit misleading because it's not a form per se. It's just if you go into your account, into your CIWEM account, there's an online submission section that you will need to complete. This is what we understand under application form. Then you will need a copy of your most up-to-date CV. Submit copies of relevant certificates signed by one of your sponsors. When we say certificates, we usually mean like degree certificates. So not necessarily other membership certificates. We usually tend to focus on qualification certificates. Then you need to have 2 chartered sponsors. One of them must hold C.WEM. They will need to review your application, and they will also need to submit a signed letter to confirm that they have reviewed your application. Lucy's already and Selina's already mentioned this. Do rely on your sponsors. They are there to help you. So it's very important that you do ask for their input, and they do review your submission. We can almost always tell the difference between an application that has been reviewed by a sponsor and one that hasn't, and simply because someone who has already gone through the process is able to adequately guide you through the process yourself, and hopefully to successfully obtaining chartership. So do ask for the input of your sponsors. What you will also need is a 1,000-word career overview report. This really should be a narrative of your career history to date. We usually advise candidates to not focus on personal details simply because they are not relevant. So things like where you were born, ethnicity, these kind of things, these get redacted from the application anyway due to GDPR. So really just focus on the narrative, highlighting the key achievements that have led you to where you are currently. We'll also require you to submit a CPD record for the last 3 years. Now, this is love it or hate it. Some people love CPD, some people hate CPD. It's unfortunately a requirement. So what we require here is 90 hours over the last 3 years. This can be on a rolling period, so you don't have to have 30 hours in 1 year, 30 hours in the other year. Again, just repeating what I've already said, is do start recording your CPD early on, not when you're about to submit for chartership, just because it can be quite daunting to remember what CPD you've undertaken 3 years ago. I can see Selena shaking her head. So yeah, do start thinking about your CPD quite early on and start recording that. In terms of the bulk of the chartership application, this is the 4,000 word mandatory competence attainment report. This really forms the core of your application. So again, do start thinking about this early on and just start jotting down, ideas, start thinking about projects that you feel passionate about, that you feel happy talking about. One more tip that I'd like to add, in addition to what Lucy and Selena have already said, yes, it's very important to be passionate about projects, but also pick projects that you know in great detail. Essentially, one of our interviewers told us that if it's in your application, it's fair game at interview. So make sure that you can talk about the projects that you choose in detail, because you will be asked about it at interview. And then finally, if you're going through the work-based learning route, this is if you don't have a bachelor's degree with honours, then you will also need to submit a CIWEM work-based learning statement form. This is to supplement your standard chartership application. And really the aim of this is to demonstrate degree level learning. Briefly talking about the CIWEM mandatory competencies, I'm just very aware of time. So yes, these are grouped into 5 categories, with the A competencies focusing on existing and emerging factors influencing environmental and water issues. This really, what we mean by this is testing your personal knowledge, and what is even more important is your wider knowledge of environmental issues. So step away a little bit from your professional and your day-to-day roles and think about like wider environmental issues. We always see applicants, being a bit unsure about what to write here. So yeah, just step away from what you work, your day-to-day working duties, and yeah, talk about wider environmental things. Then we have the B competencies, which is, they focus on planning, implementation, and evaluation of work. So this is really to demonstrate problem solvings, identifying, developing and evaluating options. There's also a competency here on the ability to initiate and manage change, and to the ability to plan and implement solutions, as well as monitor their continuing performance. So this is kind of what the B competencies focus on. Moving on to the C competencies, these focus on safe and effective working practices. So we're talking about, health and safety, quality assurance, managing resources efficiently and effectively. So these kind of elements to projects. The D competencies are about communication and professional ethics. So there's a question there about your ability to communicate in English. Should be fairly straightforward. Again, a thing to mention is that there is a word limit on the competencies, but it's not compulsory to meet the word limit. So inevitably certain competencies will take up more words than others. So for example, the D competencies are always the one that take up, a fewer lower word count. And then finally, moving on to the E competencies, these are about professional development. So CPD, future planning, that kind of stuff. And then there's also a final one where you're asked to talk about your commitment to CIWEM, which is where you're going to have to talk about what, Lucy's already said about your engagement previously, how you engage with CIWEM. That's it. It sounds a bit scary, but honestly, if you start planning in advance and if you ask for, the help from your mentor and your sponsors, then, it really shouldn't be, that daunting. Another thing is that interview, we're not out to catch you, it should be really a conversation. So as long as you pick projects that you're comfortable talking about, then it really shouldn't be, a scary or a daunting process. Just quickly mentioning the fact that if you are applying for chartership, so for Chartered Water and Environmental Manager, then you can also apply for external registrations that we are licensed to offer. So we are licensed to offer engineering technician, incorporated engineer, chartered engineer registrations. These are through the UK Engineering Council. Then also we have the chartered environmental practitioner and chartered environmentalist that we offer through and on behalf of the Society for the Environment. And we also have the Chartered Scientist is another chartered registration, which we offer on behalf of the Science Council. A quick note that you are required to apply for chartered membership, so C.WEM, in addition to be able to apply for any of the external registrations. You can apply for all at the same time, and you can have the interview at the same time. Yeah, so that makes things easier. If you are thinking about applying for any external registrations, but are not sure yet, I do recommend that you submit at the same time for C.WEM and external registrations. Some people, what they do is they apply for C.WEM first, and then they apply for the external registration later. I always think it's a lot easier to just do it at the same time, simply because, you know, you're already in the process of it. You won't need an extra interview. You know, you essentially, if you submit for an external registration, it's like submitting a new application in itself. So it's always easier and more time and cost effective to do all at the same time, if this is something that you are considering. And finally, just to wrap things up quickly, just talking about our routes to fellowship. So we have 2 direct entry routes to fellowship. One is if you're also looking to apply for chartership, that this is the C.WEM C.WEM membership grade. You will need to obviously, you know, submit an application for chartership, which I've already mentioned, and then supplement that by a fellowship application element. The application requirements and details are available on the website. As I've mentioned, everything I've said already is available there. So do make sure to check it out. Then we also have another direct entry to fellowship. This is a route for individuals who don't want to obtain chartership, so they're only really interested in becoming a fellow of C.WEM. If you're already a chartered member of C.WEM and you're thinking about transferring to fellow, then you can do that relatively simply. This is called a transfer to fellowship. The application requirements, you know, that they're not that stringent. You need a report, so a statement and some sponsor letters and CPD. So that's fairly easy if that is something that you're looking to do. And then finally, we have the nominated fellow. This is a more of a bespoke route. So this is for individuals who are very senior in their career, but have not been involved previously with C.WEM in any way, shape or form, but they're very eminent in their field. As the name says it, they need to be nominated by someone. So yeah, again, the details of this are available on the website. So if you're unsure, do look at the website and email us, call us. We're here to help you, essentially. I think that was a very quick rundown of all our membership grades. I realize that this is a lot of information. So yeah, just I've already said this before, but yeah, do get in touch if you have any questions. Selena, I think that is me done.
Yep. Brilliant. Thank you, Barbara. And just on cue, we do have a couple of questions around the membership, actually. If I take the first one, what approach do you suggest if you have worked in the field over 15 years, but have had a long career break and only recently got back on track in the last 2.5 years? So I'm guessing this is in terms of your chartership. So yeah, if you've had a career break and you've had 15 years experience prior to that, Barbara, do you think you could use that experience, the earlier 15 years, or does it, for the competencies, does it need to be no later than 5 years? I can't remember.
I mean, it depends. It really depends on how long the career break was. If it's a couple of years, then there shouldn't be any issues around applying for chartership. If it's longer than that, then probably, because, you know, what I've already mentioned, you need to remember everything that you've done in great details. And if it's been 15 years since you've done the project that you're talking about, I'm not sure you're going to remember everything.
Yeah, sorry, it hasn't been 15 years since she's had the person's had 15 years experience and then a long career break. But I'm not sure about the career break yet.
Okay. I think in that case, I think perhaps C.WEM is a fantastic, you know, it's a good first way to just kind of step into membership, and then, you know, just try and think about, you know, the competencies and CPD. Obviously, because of career break, I'm not entirely sure about how well you've been able to keep up to date with your CPD record as well. So usually if the career break was longer than 2 years, it becomes rather difficult to demonstrate CPD and the mandatory competencies to the required standards. So what I would recommend is go for C.WEM first, start thinking about CPD, you know, start building on your career, find a C.WEM, so a chartered member sponsor who's going to be able to help you, and start thinking about jotting down projects for your competencies. In theory, there's no requirement for the projects to be very, very recent.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But, you know, if it's been a long time, then, you know, the question remains whether you do actually remember every single detail about them.
Thank you, Barbara. I hope that answers your question. Got another one. I have graduated 4 years ago and only started a relevant career 6 months ago. Am I eligible for graduate membership?
Okay, so seeing as you graduated 4 years ago, short answer is no. But again, you can join as a non-chartered member.
Okay.
So you would meet, yeah.
Did you need a minimum requirement of 2 years to be a non-chartered member? I think that was the issue with that
but
one.
as I understand, they have other experience as well, so there wasn't a career break necessarily.
No career break.
Okay.
Yep.
So in theory, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to apply for non-chartered membership if you have some kind of professional experience for non-chartership. Alternatively, I've mentioned environmental partner. There's a very minimal application required with that, and it will still give you access to all of our resources. So that is also an option available.
Thank you. Regards to sponsors, would members of other institutions be acceptable? The ICE or Institute of Water, I believe the other one is.
So as long as they're chartered members, yes, but you do have to have one member who's a chartered member of C.WEM. So you need 2 chartered sponsors, one who is C.WEM, and the other sponsor can be chartered through another institution like the IC, for example.
Brilliant, thank you. This has been answered earlier. Can you apply for a member of C.WEM if you have less than 2 years industry experience? I've been a graduate member for more than 2 years now, but don't have 2 years industry experience. It looks like they've recently got an email from C.WEM stating they can now apply for the membership status. Mm-hmm. Because I've graduated for 2 years, but I think that should be fine to apply for the membership status.
Yes, absolutely.
How can international engineers join C.WEM? And what professional bodies do their sponsors need to be affiliated with? That's a good question. If it's an international engineers.
I suppose it depends what institution you're holding your engineering registration with. So the UK Engineering Council has mutual recognition agreements with Engineers Ireland, Engineers New Zealand, and one other that escapes my memory. So if you're holding an engineering registration through those, then there might be a streamlined route available to you whereby you might not need to undertake a professional interview if you pass written assessment. However, if there is no mutual recognition agreement between the Engineering Council and your country of provenance or your institution of provenance, then you will need to go through the entire process from scratch. You will probably also need to undergo academic assessment before you apply for chartered engineers, simply because one of the requirements is that for a standard route C.Eng application, the Engineering Council requires you to have accredited degrees by the Engineering Council. If your degrees are not accredited by the Engineering Council, then you will need to undergo academic assessment to determine your eligibility. And then depending on the outcome of that, you will need to submit an individual route application. That's a very long-winded answer. The short version of it that you can, yes, certainly join the institution, but it all depends on whether there's a mutual recognition agreement or not.
Thank you. I've got a question here from Jamie. I graduated from a geography BSc degree in May and started a graduate job as a hydraulic modeler last month. What tips apart from graduate membership would you give me for my CIWEM progression at this early point in my career? Lucy, I guess, you know, through your CIWEM journey, this might be a good one for you.
I think the key one would be to kind of recording what you're doing in terms of both CPD and the projects you're working on. Have a look, make sure you understand what the attributes are, so that when you're working on things, you can kind of have a reflection and go, okay, what have I been working on? What attributes does that work towards? And it also means as you get further into your career, you'll be able to identify which attributes you're lacking less, which will help you kind of guide which projects to kind of get more involved in as well. But the big one is recording CPD. It's painful trying to do that retrospectively.
Jamie, also, I don't know if you're aware, on the CIWEM website, if you're a member, you have access to record your CPD digitally. So that's an excellent way to keep your log up to date. So when you do come to apply for your chartership, it's all already there and you can select which years you want to display. And also just another tip, I would get a sponsor to help you kind of navigate and make sure that you're able to get the experience you need for the different competencies. So, and good luck with your journey. So the next question, I graduated 8 years ago, spent 5 years in the water industry, had a career break of 2 years, then rejoined the industry last year. At this point last year, I was granted graduate CIWEM membership. Should this not be the case, will being a graduate member rather than an unchartered member with 6 years experience impact my ability to apply for my chartership? Barbara, do you want to take that one?
No, I did. The short answer is no. There should be no obstacles to you applying for chartership. For example, we don't even require members applicants to be CIWEM members before applying for chartership. So your previous membership history should have no bearing on your chartership application.
Thank you. And the final question, if you are a C environmentalist member, do you need to go through the chartered route or direct membership?
That's a very good question. So if you already hold CN, so chartered environmentalist or chartered engineer, then you will not need to undergo a professional interview. So you will still need to require to submit an online application to meet all the requirements, including the mandatory competencies. You will still need to undergo written assessment. But if you pass written assessment as a recognition of your already existing chartership, you would not need to undergo professional interview and you would be awarded C.WEM.
Oh, excellent. Also, one more, how are CPDs to be logged in and does it have to be signed off by some competent authority? I can answer that one. So you could, oh, that disappeared, the question off my screen. Yeah, so it doesn't need to be signed off. And also you can log it on, as I suggested earlier, the CIWEM website. So if you're a member, there's the ability to keep a log online. And if not, then there's no issues with keeping the log offline. Just make sure you put a description, what you gain from it, the hours and the date. So just double check the CIWEM website for the key headings on the CPD.
I'm just going to time in there just to,
yep.
So essentially, yeah, there's no requirement on you to use the CIWEM CPD template, but I do encourage you to read through the guidance in terms of what we require for CPD. So just simply listing hours of activities is not sufficient. There needs to be an element of reflection and future planning in your CPD record as well.
Brilliant, thank you. That ends our questions and that's perfect timing. So thank you all for joining us, and just check the chat because there's some useful links in there from Barbara Woods on the next sessions, next events, and how to participate in CIWEM.